Hey there, everybody in the FFBE Global Facebook group, and hello to everybody who sees this video on YouTube as well. Welcome to this week's episode of Ask an Old Mog, where we take a look at some questions from the FFBE Global Facebook group and try to answer them in a visual format, usually aimed at trying to help maybe newer players understand something new in the game, or talking about new mechanics, but sometimes also just kind of random questions that people have. Maybe they're like taking a break from the game and coming back and they're like not sure where to pick up, or they've just got some questions about how something works. And those are some of my favorite questions in these, because we get to do a lot of discussion. And the other neat thing about a lot of these questions, in my opinion, is that they are very opinion based. And so I want to try and get the conversation going, whether that happens on Facebook or here on YouTube in the comments. You know, I want to know what your opinions are too. So if you have an opinion on today's topic, definitely drop a comment, because I want to share those with the original poster of this question, so we can kind of get the conversation going. So wherever you see this video, please comment so that we can share that with the viewer. But let's get into the question, because I think it's an interesting one. So the question came up something along the lines of who are some of the best units in the game? And they said, like, you know, some of the newer Neovisions units, the natural 5-star base units. Are there any 4-star base units that turn into good 7 stars? And they've just got a lot of questions about, like, who are the good units in the game? And really, that can take a lot of different approaches. And so when it comes to, like, who are the best Neovisions units, I'm going to say anything that was created in the last 4 or 5 months is probably, you know, top tier. And then you've got Esther on top of that, Storm Seeker Esther on top of that, you know, and then plus anybody else who's been created in the last 5 months, probably going to be top tier and best in the game right now. But then the other parts of this question, like natural 5-star base units, are there any 4 stars that can turn into good 7 stars? And so to try and answer that question, I thought I would, you know, dig into it a little bit and then share some assumptions that are going to base on how I answer it. So take a look here. With the exception of any 3 or 4-star base units that become Neovisions Awakenings, most of these 3 or 4-star, 5-star base units are not really worth your time, except when they provide an extremely niche utility ability, like Shara, for example, does really easily gears for LB fill and entrusting every turn. And I've done that multiple times just for, like, kind of like, you know, quick and easy LB fill clears and stuff like that. But that's a very niche thing that Shara does. The other assumption here is that if a 5-star base unit can become an NVA, I'm not including them in this list, because obviously NVAs, just because their stats are better and they have, like, Neovision's abilities, are going to be better than 5-star base units almost all the time. You know, it's the difference between having a buff skill, for example, that does like a 200% buff or a 300% buff or a 250% buff. It's just they are just inherently better once they become Neovisions Awakening. So I'm not including them here. What that means is I'm mainly looking at 5-star base units that do not become NVAs. Now, for the most part, 5-star base units that don't become NVAs are mainly useful for their Trustmaster rewards and Super Trustmaster rewards these days, and that's just because the NVAs and the Neovisions units are just that much better than those 5-star base, even when you become 7 stars. But there are some exceptions, and these are some kind of neat characters and units that kind of like develop you know, interesting or unique skills that can really support your party and be put in a party with Neovisions units and still help them do good damage or survive incoming damage or fill their LB every turn, or other things. And so those are kind of the assumptions, you know. And I'm going to pop up a video too that is a link to something that I did a couple of weeks ago about good STMRs and TMRs that you might want copies of, and that's a good use of 5-star base units these days. But those are the 2 assumptions, and let's talk about some different things. To make this really simple, I'm going to try and break these down into categories. And so we're going to talk about support units, tanks, healers, some damage dealing units and things like that, as well as some just kind of random units that kind of fill in the gaps otherwise. Some really good support type units. These are units that give you buffs and immunities and things like that. Are going to include some of the following. So like original Sylvie is probably top tier across the board. She does She does buffs for your team's stats. She does breaks for the enemy. She can break the enemy. She imbues you with multiple elements, provides status immunity, break immunity, elemental resistances. She can give you chaining skills. She can just do everything that a support unit really wants. And she's a 7-star unit. And her imperils that she does with her imbue abilities, because they imbue the party and make the enemies weak to that element. Her imperils are actually fairly good. They're like 120. So Sylvie is a very, very good unit. And if you are starting out now, or you're just wanting to do something with 7-star units for some reason, or you just need an easy support to shove into a party, original Sylvie, just like new Sylvie, is really, really good. Another example would be Realm. Realm is one of the only sources of Rod Imperil that we have, and is the only source of a Rod Imperil at 7-star. She can also provide killers for your team. She can do stat buffs. She can technically cast magic spells. She can do a lot of things. LB fill, useful stuff. Selphie, the Final Fantasy VIII character, she does really good LB fill and support for LB for your entire party. She can unlock skills. She can do some buffs. She can technically break a little bit. She can provide immunities to different ailments and things. Very, very useful. As well as just helping you chain. She can actually do a little bit of damage with Chaos Wave Awaken chaining for multiple elements. Kind of cool. Rivera, she can give your team killers. She can make somebody else become a tank. She can imbue the party with light element. She can cast Reflect just by using her auto attack. She can do damage technically. She can do a lot of different things. And so, Rivera is a very flexible support character and can easily find her way into some funny builds, including some new ones that have just been making the scene with the new Berserker Riku. And then also Renora is kind of kind of one that people don't really think about a whole lot, but Renora is one of the few units that can provide Mirage stacks for the party on demand, as well as buffs and mitigations. Can do some pretty nice stuff, can give racial mitigations for humans and machines. So kind of a neat support unit in Renora when you add in the Mirage stacks and the mitigations and stuff like that. So those are some ideas of some various supports you might be able to cram into a Neovisions team. Let's talk about another type of unit though. Breakers. So obviously Neovisions breakers are almost always be better than the old 7-star breakers. So modern breaks today are going to be anything 83% or above, and some units, even though they're 7-stars, can do really good breaks. Or really good imperils. Like, a typical imperil is like 120 to 125, 130 these days. And some of these 7-star units had stuff like that. And so here's some examples. Avalanche Jessie does an all-element imperil and can do a full break on demand, can add Mirage stacks on a cooldown, can do an accuracy debuff on a cooldown, and her breaks on her limit burst go up to 87% on a 7-star unit. Pretty cool. Seeker of Freedom Vaughn, he does 130% fire imperil on a 7-star unit, is pretty cool, as well as a 120 wind imperil or fire imperil depending on what skills you use, but his LB does a 130. He can also do really good breaks. He can also do a perfect dispel, which removes the enemy's buffs but leaves their breaks, which means you can continue doing damage without having to rebuff or re-break the boss, which is really cool. Benevolent Beauty Rem can also do killers for your party, and she can imperil 3 different elements at 120%. She can contribute to chaining, she can do heals. Lots of cool stuff from some of these breakers, and even though they're 7-star units, again, they can do, 120 imperils or 85 or 87% breaks in Jessie's case, which is still very, very useful, in today's meta, even if if you're just bringing them for breaks and imperils, they do just as well as some current Neovisions units at doing that, which is kind of cool for a 7-star unit. All right, let's talk about tanks. Tanks are very important for survival, and modern tanks, they come with a lot of really good mitigations and personal damage reduction skills and stuff like that. But if you aren't facing the toughest of the tough, enemies, and you're wanting to just kind of bring a fun tank that can provide some extra utility or something, you can find ways around that. Like a physical tank, for example, can, if the boss does not have accuracy, just use Mirage, and then they can use their support skills while also just covering your tank and just evading the skills through Mirage or evasion abilities. Or if you have a magic tank, they can soak up the damage with elemental resistance, gear, and buffs, while still providing support. So here's a couple examples. Hallowed Aegis Charlotte is very flexible. She can be physical tank or magical tank, and she can also do like entrust and mitigations and party support. Lots of cool stuff that Hallowed Aegis Charlotte can do for your team. Steiner is another example. He's a physical tank. He does provoke. He does physical cover. He also does LB fill for the party by sacrificing his own LB, or in a clear I did recently, he can use his limit burst to give the whole party various stacks of reflect, so that VV can bounce magic off of your party onto the enemy and chain and do lots of damage. So he's, if you're going to bring VV, you want to bring Steiner, and he's a 7-star unit, which is kind of sad when you think about maybe wanting to bring VV to Clash of Wills. But you can bring VV to Dark Visions. So that means you can bring Steiner, and that works if you want to bring Steiner for that, which is kind of cool. Bosch is another unit that is flexible. He can be physical tank or magical tank. At this point, his like mitigations are really, really low. But again, if you're going to be using evasion or mirage or elemental resistances, then that matters a little bit less, because he can also do some breaks. Not super, super good, but he can do it. He can do some breaks and some other support for your party. The last one I want to talk about is one of my favorites. He's a magic cover tank, Biggs and Wedge from Final Fantasy VII. They do preemptive magic cover. They can also do LB support. They can fill your LB. They can do mitigations for like aquatic enemies, which is kind of random, but I'm sure there's a reason for it. And then they also tag chain on their basic attacks. So like if you can make it so that they attack 4 times and give them elemental weapons, they can build up a nice elemental chain very, very easily, and then you can just cap it with whatever finisher you want. And they're super, super easy to squeeze into a team just for their tag team chaining alone. One of my favorites as a 7-star unit. They can do a lot of stuff for you. All right, let's talk healing. Healers, and when it comes to healing, unless they provide like special benefits, healers are really just filling your HP, and it's honestly better in today's meta to avoid taking damage altogether. Kind of always has been, but there frequently are times where you want a healer, and if you only have 7-star units, there are some that are available. Kalmia is one of the newest ones, and she's from Season 3. She can heal zombie, which is very rare for a 7-star unit to be able to do. So that's kind of cool. Ayaka's a really old 7-star base unit, or 5-star base unit. She can heal stop, prevent stop, cure most statuses. She can do full heal and MP restore on some of her abilities, which means you don't really matter how low her spirit is. She just fills all your HP back up instantly, which is pretty cool. She can also do HP barriers, which is really nice. And then Warrior of Light Lena does a lot of different healing type things, immunities and resistances, and fire immunity, water immunity, or resistances. And she can triple cast. She's one of the few units that can. And she can triple cast all those abilities, and she can also cast like, the various holy spells. Yeah, she's pretty cool. So when it comes to healing, we don't really need a whole lot of them, and there are some 7-star units, and this is by no means exhaustive. I'm just kind of picking and choosing some of the ones I feel like are best. I also polled some people and got some opinions on some of these units. If you've got another opinion, we're gonna share that. Let us know what some of your favorites are too. Let's talk damage dealers. So this one's controversial, because the whole point of power creep is that newer units are obviously going to be better, but there are some 7-star units that did do good damage at their time, and depending on what you're facing, you still can, especially if you're just going to plan on giving them like chaining skills from current units. So like Stormseeker Esther can give other units their Extreme Nova chaining frames, or you can equip Eye of the Dragon, Lightning Fast Legend. You could give a 7-star unit a vision card slot and give them the Hio vision card, and then they can cast Blazing Red Flash if they're an FFBE unit. You know, there's lots of things you could do to give better damage skills to your units. But some examples of good ones here. You know, Zenata has 5 times cast, and that's on a 7-star unit, which is like, wow, you know, nobody really did that. And Zenata was like kind of towards the very end of the original 7-star meta. So like she's kind of like top of the top there when it comes to like units that were new when that meta was around. The original Esther was strong when she came out. She became stronger about a year later, and then about a year after that, she got even stronger when they released, you know, additional upgrades and buffs for her. She even has a Magnus ability. There are very few 7-star units that have Magnus abilities, and she has one, which is super cool. You know, give her the right gear, and she's still very strong. Olive. The original Olive, one of the original 5-star base units, one of the original global 5-star base units at that, is still, if you give her good gear, pretty good at capping with her LB, especially if you give her stuff like Tyvis Spirit. Although if you have Tyvis Spirit, why aren't you just running Tyvis? But she can do some good damage, and I've seen this firsthand in the unofficial anniversary live stream where we had to use Olive as our chain capper. So she's pretty cool. Hyo and Chair Rain, I'm going to call her Chair Rain. He's like the Aldor King Rain or whatever. They can chain with each other and do pretty good damage at it, which is, you know, kind of nice considering they do Extreme Nova. And that lets them, you know, chain with some modern units as well. And those are just some examples of damage dealers. You know, damage dealers are a dime a dozen. Pick your favorite. Pick the ones that do the element you want or the chain frames you want. And you know, lots of units do Bolting Strike. You can fit them in with current units if you're just going to be chaining with other Neovisions units. And then finally, just some random stuff. So like I'm including Mastermind Zahn in this. He's random in that he does a little bit of everything. He can chain almost every chaining frame, all the physical chaining frames he can chain with. He can apply Mirage stacks. Technically, he can do breaks a little bit. And then the big thing that he does is he can steal buffs from other people and copy them to himself and then spread them to the whole party. So like he can borrow somebody's killer buff, for example. If you have like a single target killer buff, he can borrow it from them, put it on himself, and then borrow some elemental resists over there, and then borrow like an imbue ability from somebody else. And then the next turn, spread it around so that everybody has the killer, the elemental resistances, and the imbue buff. And everybody's good to go at that point. So he's very flexible, and he can fit into lots and lots of parties. Braska from Final Fantasy X is a rare unit that can buff evocation skills with a cooldown. I learned about that recently. It's pretty cool that he can do that. Regis from Final Fantasy 15 is pretty meh, but does do 4 killers on a cooldown, which is kind of cool. He can do pretty good buffs and also give chaining skills to people. So like if people need chaining abilities that match up, he can give chaining skills. And then finally, you know, Moogle of Narsh Mog from Final Fantasy VI is one of few units that can provide imperil fields and imbues for those imperil fields. He can do wind and ice, which is pretty cool, literally. He makes it so that the enemies, in addition to the imperil that you already put on, have an additional stacking imperil field on their side only. You can do some really funny things with that. I've made videos about that before, so definitely check out some of those units. But I want to know, like, you know, who are some of your favorites? And I hope that this helps you realize that, you know, while Neovision's units are the obvious meta, that there is still some good stuff in there. But to be honest, like the large majority of 5-star base units that become 7 stars are really just for you getting TMRs and STMRs, and some are some really good ones, which is why I posted that video about, you know, the TMRs and STMRs you might want multiple copies of, and brought that into this video as well. So if you've got ones that you think might be useful, and you want to share those, please, you know, let us know in the comments. Drop a comment on Facebook, drop a comment on YouTube, wherever you see this video. You know, who are some of your favorites? Who are the ones that I missed? Why are they good? What do you use them for when you want to use them? Because I know there are people out there like me who do like to just kind of do fun stuff sometimes and play around with old 7-star units. For that matter, are there any 7-star units that you unlocked a vision card slot for? You know, Jesse's a prime example of somebody who would be a really good one to put a vision card on, because there's a vision card that can make it so that a unit starts with their LB. Jesse's a good one for that. Steiner's a good one for that. Who are some examples of 7-star units that you unlocked a vision card slot for and have been enjoying using them? But that's all I got for right now. So if you've got a question you want to see in next week's video, let me know in the comments as well, and we can do our best to try and put that together. But in the meantime, I hope you have a great rest of your week, and a good night, and a good morning, and be good to each other, and stay safe out there. All right? Take care.